Eliminating genetic diseases and putting an end to cell mutations could soon become an everyday treatment. According to a new report, genome editing, which is the alteration of the DNA of human eggs or early embryos, this could soon be ethically permitted. Let's bring in some guests to discuss this in more depth now. I'm joined by Dr. Christopher, if I've got the pronunciation right, Gingell, Marie Curie Fellow at the Oxford Uhiro Centre for Practical Ethics in Oxford, and also joined by Tim Dieppe, who's the Director of Christian Concern in London. Welcome to you both, gents. Chris, if I can come to you first. I'm sure the scientists are saying this isn't going to be the case, an era of so-called designer babies, but is it a danger somewhere down the line?
Well, it depends how they implement this technology. It depends on our regulation. Right now we have other technologies that allow us to avoid genetic disease, like pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, and there are strict regulations that say we can only use those technologies to prevent disease. So we can implement gene editing technologies the same way. We can limit them to the prevention of genetic diseases.
OK, Tim, how do you feel about this in principle, though? A lot of people will have a problem with this in terms of just how ethical it is.
Yes, I mean, gene editing on its own in order to combat disease in someone and just on their normal cells is potentially helpful and useful and can combat a range of different diseases. Where I have concerns is that this report didn't rule out germline editing and said that germline editing could be used in certain circumstances. And I think that's where they've crossed an ethical line that is widely recognised to be unethical and not supported and not agreed. And in the words of the director of the National Institute of Health in the US, he said germline editing is unethical, unsafe and unnecessary. And I think there's a number of reasons for that, because you're editing actually the genome of whole future generations ad infinitum, for potentially forevermore. And it's an irreversible edit with unforeseeable safety and social consequences that could come about as a result of that kind of editing. And the safety is far from guaranteed. You could be, with current technology, there are many off-target mutations that happen with quite high frequency, and that could cause all sorts of damage. And the problem is, if you do that to the germline, then you've affected that for all future generations, and without
Chris,
permission
I'm just
of all
sorry
those.
to interrupt you. I just want to come to Chris and give him a chance to respond to that. The danger of possible mutations caused by the actual developments themselves.
Well, look, if you read the report carefully, it says we're not thinking about using these technologies tomorrow. They are very recently developed. What we need to do is thorough safety testing to eliminate problems like off-target mutations. What the report says is that, in theory, at the rate of this progression of the technology, these technologies are going to produce little to no mutations, or it's going to be the same as the rate of background mutations. Now, we alter the human germline all the time when we have children. Every one of us has random mutations. And some activities that we partake in, such as when we let older fathers produce children, they have a much greater rate of random mutations that they pass on to their children. Same with people that smoke. They produce random germline mutations that they pass on to their children that are in the germline that affect generations to come. Okay. So we're already altering the germline.
Chris,
in lots of ways.
Why do we need
this? It's a question about how we alter it.
Why do we need this, Chris?
Well, we need this. We should. Well, it's not about whether we need or don't need. It's about how we use it and what we use it for. We should be using these technologies to reduce suffering. We should be using it to reduce suffering caused by disease, and we should be using it to promote human happiness and human well-being. I think that's the same across a lot of different technologies. It's not about whether we need it or not. It's here now. It's being developed. We need to have a discussion about how to use it best.
Tim, how's that for a point then? You know, we don't need it, but it's going to help people. It's going to reduce suffering is the argument.
Well, I think, Neil, you spotted the flaw in his argument there. Just because we have a technology doesn't mean we should use it. And I think that's a fatally flawed argument there.
Well, it's going to be used.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the case. It's actually banned in multiple countries all over the world, and many people recognise that this is an ethical line in terms of artificially enhancing or changing or altering the germline. That really should not be crossed, because the consequences are unforeseeable and uncontainable going forwards. How do you stop people continuing this artificial mutation that you've created or enabled in many future generations, and whose fault is it? Who has the liability with potential consequences for that going forward?
If you look at the report, what it says, the scenarios that it condones sort of germline modifications are where you've got a single embryo which is it has 2 disease-mutant mutations, and there's no other way to prevent it from a genetic disease like Tay-Sachs syndrome. This is a disease that is fatal. It kills children before they're 2 years old. We could use this technology to save that child, to create a child that is free from disease, that then can therefore live a healthy life. Now, what's unpredictable about that? What's the big risk about using this to prevent those simple genetic diseases? We're not talking about making lots of different changes, lots of different genes. We're talking about correcting genetic mutations that are known to cause disease.
Would you be okay with that then, Tim, in certain rare circumstances?
I think once you've changed it into altering the germline, because you're then affecting all future generations, and because you're doing it in an irreversible way for the entire cells of that person's body forevermore, it started to become something that has crossed an ethical boundary that most people recognise is a serious one because of its irreversible consequences and because of the consequences that continue into all future generations from there onwards. I think what you've got to balance here is the risks versus the benefits, and because the risks are so large, because they stretch all the way into the future forevermore and unquantifiable and unpredictable, and the social risks and the potential for eugenics and for modification and design of babies and all these other things that come with it, we should actually draw a clear ethical line here and say this should not be used in this way. And just because we've got technology certainly doesn't mean we need to use it in every way we can use it.
Chris, I just want to put to you the possibility.
I think we should draw a clear line. The clear line should be we should use it to prevent disease. The clear line should be we should use this to save things for disease.
OK, Chris, you've outlined some rare genetic disorders that it would be used to deal with. If those are successful, surely there will be a clamour then, people saying cancer, it's the scourge of humanity, we need to use this technology to cure the sick. How do you stop that? It's a logical argument and lots of people will make it.
It should be used to cure the sick.
If we live in liberal democracies,
Sorry, just let Chris answer this first, please, Tim.
It's going to be, I agree, it's going to be up to society about how we use technologies, about where we put the limits. But that's why I think we need to start on things where we all agree that we have good reason to use it, such as in the prevention of disease. Now, say you could prevent, you can use this to correct genes that are associated with cancer. I would have no problem with that. We try to fight cancer in all different types of ways. I think we should be doing everything we can to reduce suffering, to make sure that we have people that can live healthily into old age. So
you'd be okay with dealing with cancer. Then what? Then people are clamouring for, well, I don't want my child to look a certain way, and this is a benefit for the child and for me.
So now we're talking about a clear limit here, which is a clear difference between going from the prevention of disease to what's called enhancement. Now, right now, how we govern other genetic technologies like pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, we say you can use them to prevent disease, but not for enhancement. And I think we should have the same approach with this technology.
I want to come across to you again, Tim, because as we've seen, Christopher's calling for a line, but it seems like that line can be moved depending on what the public wants. Isn't that what we call playing God?
Well, I think it is, really. I think he's very unclear on that, and I think he's just saying we should do whatever public opinion wants, and if public opinion wants eugenics, and public opinion decides we want enhanced babies, or we want improved babies, want designer babies, whatever, then public opinion should rule and public opinion should decide, and that's a very flimsy way of deciding what ethics are and what the boundaries are here, and how you decide what's right and what's wrong. And I think that, I think there are some very clear lines here about germline editing is one thing, helping curing somebody who's got cancer already is another thing. I'm very in favour of curing somebody who's got cancer or some other disease today. That's fine. Let's use the technology to do that where it's appropriate. But then saying, I want to create a baby that's free of this, create a baby that's got this, that's got that, you're then straying into a whole nother different realm, and that's not about curing someone's disease. It's about creating, editing, playing God, as you say.
Chris, is there much pressure to bring through this technology in a hurry? Presumably there's great interest from various areas.
Look, I don't think anyone is progressing too fast. It's very hard because the technology itself has progressed very, very quickly. But in a lot of countries around the world, they've got very strict regulations about how this technology can be used, and it's it's quite widely restricted in a lot of places. So I think we need to step carefully. I think we need to look at the risks and benefits, but I think you talk about where we should draw the ethical lines. I think we should look for our values and look at how we run our society and what values we approach. I think we value health, we value the prevention of suffering, and we value happiness and well-being, and those should be the ethical principles that guide our implementation of this technology.
Gentlemen, a big thank you to you both for coming on. Really interesting subject. My guest, Dr. Christopher Gingell, Marie Curie Fellow at the Oxford Your Hero Centre for Practical Ethics in Oxford, and also Tim Dieppe, who's the Director of Christian Concern in London. Thank you so much.
Thank you.